Level 1. The Fraternal Brotherhood, Freemasonry. Somewhere around 1390, the exact date is still debated, a document called the Regius Manuscript was written in England. It contains the earliest known reference to organized stonemasons operating under a code of moral conduct, ritual initiation, and sworn secrecy. A craft guild document. Practical, earthbound, describing the obligations of men who cut and placed stone. Nobody reading it in 1390 could have imagined that the intellectual DNA it carried would eventually shape the founding documents of the United States, the layout of Washington, D.C., and the careers of at least 14 American presidents. Freemasonry as a formal institution emerged in its recognizable modern form in 1717 when 4 London lodges merged to create the premier Grand Lodge of England. Within 50 years, lodges had spread across Europe, the American colonies, and into parts of Africa and Asia. At its peak in the mid-20th century, Freemasonry had over 6 million members worldwide. Today that number sits closer to 3 million. And the decline itself is worth tracking, because it happened right as conspiracy culture about Freemasonry reached its loudest pitch. The more people talked about Masonic power, the fewer Masons there were. Draw your own conclusion from that. The structure is built on degrees of initiation, 33 degrees in the Scottish Rite. Most members never advance beyond the 3rd. Each degree unlocks different teachings, philosophical frameworks drawn from ancient Egyptian religion, Kabbalah, Pythagorean geometry, and Enlightenment rationalism. Brothers are taught to recognize each other through handshakes, words, and physical gestures specific to their degree level. These were called the modes of recognition, and they were genuinely secret for centuries. Here is where the simple explanation starts to unravel. In 1826, a former Mason named William Morgan in Batavia, New York, announced he was going to publish the rituals. He was arrested on fabricated charges, released, then abducted. His body was never found. What followed was not just a local scandal, it triggered a national anti-Masonic political movement, the first third political party in American history, and a congressional investigation. Dozens of witnesses refused to testify. Prosecutors who were Masons declined to pursue charges against other Masons. The Morgan affair did not prove that Masons controlled American law, but it demonstrated in documented court records that Masonic loyalty could override civic obligation in ways that left an innocent man dead and every single person responsible unpunished. What the fraternal brotherhood type offers is not secrecy for its own sake. It offers a parallel social infrastructure, one that operates by different rules than the public one, and whose members carry obligations to each other that supersede the obligations most of us would consider normal. Level 2. The political instrument, the Carbonari. Picture a network of men meeting in the back rooms of charcoal seller shops across Italy, France, and Spain in the early 1800s. Speaking in a coded language borrowed from the trade, coal, fire, water, smoke, while planning the overthrow of monarchies. This was the Carbonari. Vendors of charcoal. Architects of revolutions. Founded in the Kingdom of Naples sometime around 1806, possibly earlier, the paper trail is deliberately fragmented. The Carbonari grew from a regional resistance movement into one of the most consequential underground political networks of the 19th century. At their height, membership estimates range from 300,000 to 700,000 across southern Europe. Those are not fringe numbers. Those are the numbers of a shadow government operating inside actual governments. Their initiation involved elaborate ritual, symbolic death and resurrection, an oath sworn over a skull and crossed daggers, a tiered membership system almost identical in structure to Freemasonry. Which makes sense, because many of its founders were former Masons who wanted a version of the Brotherhood explicitly aimed at political revolution rather than philosophical development. They kept the architecture and changed the mission. The cell structure they pioneered, small autonomous groups that knew nothing about each other, would later become the standard organizational model for every serious underground political movement in history, including the networks that produced the Russian Revolution. Their direct fingerprints are on the 1820 Neapolitan Revolution, the 1821 Piedmontese Uprising, the 1830 French Revolution that removed Charles Tix, and multiple uprisings across Latin America. Giuseppe Mazzini, one of the fathers of modern Italian nationalism, began his political career as a Carbonari member. So did Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, who used the skills and connections he built in the movement to eventually crown himself Emperor of France. Here is the fracture in the official record. The Carbonari are presented in most history textbooks as a failed revolutionary movement, a romantic but ultimately unsuccessful attempt at liberalism before liberalism was ready. But that framing requires ignoring what the movement actually produced: unified Italy, a French Republic, and the cell-based organizational model that defined underground politics for the next 2 centuries. Movements don't get called failures when their methods survive them by 200 years. They get called failures when crediting their success would require acknowledging that secret political networks have, in fact, successfully reshaped nations. Every major government that has ever felt threatened by organized secrecy learned the lesson the Carbonari taught. The lesson is not that such groups fail. It is that they are most dangerous precisely when they appear to have disappeared. Level 3. The Occult Hierarchy. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. March 1, 1888, London. 3 men, William Robert Woodman, William Wynne Westcott, and Samuel Liddell Mathers, founded a magical order based on a cipher manuscript of disputed origin, claiming initiation from a German adept named Anna Sprengel, whose existence was never verified and whose address, when checked, returned no person of that name. They built it anyway, and what they built changed Western culture in ways that most people who benefit from that culture have no idea about. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn lasted in its original form only until 1900. 12 years. In those 12 years, it attracted William Butler Yeats, Aleister Crowley, Arthur Machen, Algernon Blackwood, Florence Farr, and Bram Stoker, some of the most influential writers and artists in the English-speaking world. Yeats used Golden Dawn symbolism throughout his poetry so extensively that scholars have written entire dissertations unpacking it. Bram Stoker's Dracula contains structural elements drawn directly from Golden Dawn initiation ritual. The monster narrative, the occult investigator, the battle between sacred and profane, these were not genre conventions Stoker invented. He borrowed an existing ritual architecture and stretched a story across it. The system itself was a synthesis. Egyptian religion, Kabbalah, tarot, Enochian magic, alchemy, and Rosicrucian mysticism were combined into a coherent initiatory curriculum of 10 grades, organized on a structure called the Tree of Life. Members did not simply read about these traditions, they performed them. Rituals lasting hours, in full ceremonial regalia, invoking specific forces in specifically prepared spaces. This was not metaphorical. They believed it was real, functional, and dangerous if done incorrectly. What the official cultural history of the early 20th century never quite addresses is the degree to which people at the highest levels of British arts, politics, and academia were doing something that, if practiced today by a group of lower-income individuals in a rented hall, would be dismissed as dangerous fanaticism. Florence Farr, one of the leading actresses of her era, and a close associate of George Bernard Shaw, was a temple chief. Yeats ran for a time what was essentially a faction within the order. These were not marginal figures dabbling in nonsense. They were central figures in Western modernity who believed that reality could be altered through structured ritual, and who organized their lives and networks accordingly. The order splintered after Crowley was expelled. But it did not end. It mutated. Offshoots proliferated across Europe and America, and their texts, rituals, and frameworks became the bedrock of virtually every Western occult tradition that followed. A network built on 12 years of operation became the invisible grammar of an entire cultural current that is still running. Level 4. The Corporate Elite Network. Skull A&D Bones. 15. That is the number of Yale University seniors inducted into Skull and Bones every single year since 1832. Not 14, not 16. 15. The specificity is intentional. The ritual is unchanged, and in just under 2 centuries of operation, those approximately 2,800 total initiates have produced a concentration of American institutional power that does not make statistical sense. Skull and Bones, formerly called the Brotherhood of Death, though members refer to it simply as the Order, was founded at Yale by William Huntington Russell and Alphonso Taft, whose son William Howard Taft became the only American to serve as both President and Chief Justice of the Supreme Court simultaneously. Russell had just returned from studies in Germany, and the structure he brought back bore a striking resemblance to secret student societies at German universities, particularly those associated with Hegelian philosophy, which held that history moves through conflict toward a rational end state, and that an enlightened elite has an obligation to manage that movement. Among confirmed Bones members, George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, John Kerry, meaning the 2004 presidential election was a contest between 2 members of a 172-member secret society. Averell Harriman, who helped shape American foreign policy across 4 decades. Henry Stimson, Secretary of War under both Taft and FDR. William F. Buckley, Jr., who founded modern American conservatism. McGeorge Bundy, National Security Advisor during the Bay of Pigs and early Vietnam. James Jesus Angleton, who ran CIA counterintelligence for 20 years and reshaped the architecture of American intelligence services. The internal culture involves practices that former members have described under oath and in published memoirs. New initiates, called neophytes, lie in a coffin and recount their complete sexual history to senior members, a ritual called connubial bliss. Members are assigned new names. Magog is traditionally given to the member deemed to have the most sexual experience. Bonesmen meet in a building on the Yale campus called the Tomb, which has no windows on its lower floors and which Yale University has no jurisdiction over. Here is what makes the official dismissal ring hollow. Defenders of Skull and Bones point out that it is simply a college social club, an elite network no different from a fraternity. But fraternities do not produce 3 CIA directors and multiple secretaries of state from a membership that has never exceeded 800 living members at any time. That concentration of institutional power does not emerge randomly from a pool of 15 Yale seniors per year. Something inside that network, the shared language, the shared secrets, the shared obligation, creates durable institutional loyalty that survives decades and transcends party affiliation. Both men running for president in 2004 were asked directly about Skull and Bones during separate interviews. Both gave the same answer. "It's so secret," Bush said, "I can't talk about it." Kerry said the same thing, nearly word for word. When 2 men competing for the most powerful office on earth give identical non-answers about the same secret society on the same day, that is not a coincidence. That is a shared script. Level 5. The Ideological Architects, the Bilderberg Group. June 1954. Hotel de Bilderberg, Oosterbeek, Netherlands. 83 of the most powerful people in Western Europe and North America gathered at the invitation of Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands and Polish Magyar politician Jeff Retinger. No press, no official record, no public statement of purpose. They called it a conference. They have been meeting annually for 70 years. The Bilderberg Group does not deny it exists. This matters. It publishes attendee lists, or partial ones. It acknowledges that heads of state, finance ministers, central bank governors, technology executives, and media owners attend. It describes itself as a forum for informal discussion. What it does not do is publish transcripts, agendas, or outcomes. Chatham House rules apply. Participants may use what they learn, but cannot attribute it to any specific speaker. In 70 years of annual meetings, nothing discussed inside those rooms has ever been officially recorded. Prince Bernhard, one of its founders, was a former member of the SS. He joined in 1934. He later claimed to have abandoned Nazi ideology before the war, and his role in Dutch resistance operations gave him post-war credibility. But in 1976, a Lockheed bribery scandal revealed that Bernhard had accepted $1.1 million in payments to advocate for Lockheed aircraft purchases by the Dutch government. He was forced to resign all his military and public roles. The founder of the world's most powerful informal political forum had taken bribes while running it. Regular attendees over the decades have included Henry Kissinger, David Rockefeller, Margaret Thatcher, Bill Clinton, Tony Blair, Angela Merkel, Jeff Bezos, and the sitting directors of the NSA and CIA. Former NATO Secretary General Willie Claes stated publicly in 1999 that Bilderberg decisions are ratified by NATO. In 2009, EU President Herman Van Rompuy was unknown to most Europeans. He attended Bilderberg in May. By November, he was EU President. Correlation is not causation. That sentence is always true. It also stops being sufficient at a certain scale of coincidence. The European Union's architecture, its single currency, its regulatory frameworks, its relationship with NATO, tracks with positions advocated by Bilderberg attendees with a specificity that has never been adequately explained. Walter Isaacson, who has attended, described it as a place where the conversation that matters actually happens. Not the public conversation, the one that actually matters. He said this as a compliment. No elected body authorized this group to have that conversation. No citizen of any participating nation voted for the agenda it advances. It operates entirely outside the democratic frameworks its members publicly defend. And every year, it continues. Level 6. The self-replicating network. The pattern itself. No founding date. No building. No handshake. No name. This is the hardest type to talk about because it has no single instance, and that is precisely what makes it the most durable form of organized secrecy ever devised. Not a society. A method. And once you see it, you cannot stop seeing it applied. Every organization in this video, the Freemasons, the Carbonari, the Golden Dawn, Skull and Bones, Bilderberg, shares a structural core. Tiered access, shared obligation that supersedes external loyalty. Ritual bonding that creates psychological commitment deeper than contract. And a public face designed to absorb scrutiny while the actual function operates one layer below visibility. The genius is not the secrecy. The genius is the way the secrecy is legible enough to satisfy investigators while remaining impenetrable enough to protect function. This is the method that survived the fall of every organization that ever used it. The Carbonari were destroyed. The method moved to Mazzini's Young Italy, then to anarchist cells, then to Bolshevik party organization, then to every serious underground movement of the 20th century. The Golden Dawn collapsed. The method moved to the AA, to Thelema, to the OTO, to the network of occult lodges that today operate across Europe and America with a combined membership running into the tens of thousands. Organizations die. Methods don't. Sociologist Georg Simmel wrote in 1906 that secrecy is one of the greatest achievements of humanity, not as a moral endorsement, but as an analytical observation. Secrecy, he argued, creates a second world alongside the manifest world, and the power of any secret is not in its content, but in the act of concealment itself, which transforms a group of individuals into a unified body with a shared interior that no outsider can access. That interior is the power, not what is said inside it, the fact that something is said inside it that you will never know. Here is what decades of documented history actually show. Every major institutional shift in Western politics, culture, and economics since 1700, every one, has been preceded by a period of organized private discussion among a small group of people already connected through prior networks of shared obligation. The public debate that follows is real. The vote that follows is real. But the conclusion of that vote was, in a significant number of cases, already settled in a room that did not officially exist. This is not a claim about shadowy puppet masters. It is a claim about network physics. When you know someone's secrets, and they know yours, and you have both sworn an oath in the dark over a flame, the social bond formed is categorically different from any bond formed in daylight. More durable, more resistant to external pressure, more likely to produce coordinated action without any explicit instruction. The sixth type of secret society is not a society at all. It is the structural logic that every society on this list was built to exploit. Here is what every entry in this video has in common, and it is not what most people would guess. Not power. Not wealth. Not ritual. Every organization described here, from the stonemasons of medieval England to the Bilderberg attendees of last June, was built on a single foundational premise: that the people inside the room make better decisions than the people outside it, and that those outside people are better served by not knowing what was decided. Sit with that. Because it is not always wrong. Emergency medicine operates on it. Intelligence services require it. Some decisions genuinely require temporary opacity to function. The question this video has been circling since the first sentence, the one about Weishaupt's organization becoming more powerful the moment it ceased to exist, is not really about secret societies. It is about who gets to decide when secrecy is legitimate. That question has never been answered publicly, because the people best positioned to answer it are the ones most invested in maintaining the condition it describes. Adam Weishaupt dissolved the Illuminati in 1785 under pressure from the Bavarian government. His writings survived, were reprinted, circulated across Europe, and directly influenced the Carbonari, who influenced Mazzini, who influenced Lenin's organizational thinking, who shaped the architecture of every major 20th century political underground. Weishaupt lived to 82 and spent his final decades as a respected academic. His official legacy is a footnote. His actual legacy is the organizational grammar of the modern world. Every secret ever kept in the rooms described in this video was kept by someone who believed the keeping was justified. Some of them were right. Most of them were protecting something much smaller than they claimed, which is the oldest story in human organization, and also the most persistent one. The rooms are still there. The conversations are still happening, and the list of people who were never told about them includes, without exception, everyone watching this.